I saw the boy's small legs kicking in the air as the man dragged him into the woods. I was walking home from school that afternoon, cutting through the field like I always did, when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. At first, it didn't click. My mind tried to make sense of what I saw. A man white, tall and scruffy-looking, holding a child. No, dragging him. The boy was white, maybe 6 or 7 years old, kicking and squirming. But the man's grip on his arm didn't loosen. I froze, every instinct telling me to look away and keep walking. He hadn't seen me yet, but my gut screamed that this wasn't right. This wasn't some family fight. I knew it in the way the man kept glancing over his shoulder, like he was trying not to get caught. The boy's screams came next, quiet at first, then louder. "Let me go! Mommy, help!" His voice was so full of panic it sent chills down my spine. And then the man clamped his other hand over the boy's mouth. I should have run away. I should have gone and got help. But something in me wouldn't let me just walk past. What if no one else saw? What if no one else cared? I ducked behind a bush, trying to stay hidden, and pulled out my phone. My fingers were shaking so bad I could barely unlock it. My first thought was to call 911, but he was disappearing into the trees, and I didn't think they'd get here in time. Instead, I switched to recording. My camera wasn't great. It was cracked in the corner, but I aimed it as best I could. The man was dragging the boy deeper into the woods, both of them moving farther from the path. I knew I had to do something before he disappeared completely. "Hey!" I screamed, stepping out from behind the bush. My voice cracked, but I kept yelling. "What are you doing? I see you." "Let him go!" The man whipped his head around so fast I thought he'd drop the kid. His face was full of anger and fear, but the boy's huge, big round eyes looked straight at me, wide with terror. "You don't know what's going on here." "Kid!" the man barked. "Mind your own business?" He thought he could scare me off. I don't know where I found the guts, but I yelled back, "I'm recording you. I already called the cops. They're coming right now." I pointed my phone at him, shaking it like I knew what I was doing. He hesitated just for a second, then he dropped the boy's arm like it burned him. "You don't know anything," he muttered, backing up. "This is a misunderstanding." I didn't take my eyes off him as I rushed toward the boy. The man stumbled over his own feet, looking between me and the woods. Finally, he bolted into the trees, cursing under his breath. I knelt down by the boy, who was curled up on the ground. Clutching his arm, "Hey, it's okay," I said, trying to sound calm even though my heart was racing. "You're safe now. Are you hurt?" He nodded, his lip trembling. "My arm hurts." Okay, I said, glancing at his wrist. It looked red and a little swollen, but not broken. "What's your name?" Timmy, I'm Sarah. I'm going to help you get back to your mom, okay?" By some miracle, my phone had recorded everything. The boy's screams, my yelling. I hit stop and called 911 for real this time. My voice shook as I told them what had happened and gave them the location. It wasn't long before the police showed up, along with an ambulance. Timmy's mom came running out of nowhere, collapsing to her knees when she saw him. She hugged him so tight I thought she'd never let go, as the paramedics checked him over. I showed the officers the video. They took my statement, thanking me over and over for stepping in. I found out later that the man was caught not too far from the woods. He had a history, a long one, and was wanted for a similar incident in another state. Timmy's mom hugged me before they left. Her hands were shaking as much as mine had been earlier. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for saving my baby." I went home that night and cried. I cried because I was scared. I cried because it could have ended differently, but mostly, I cried because I'd almost walked away. Sometimes, I still see Timmy's face in my mind as big, scared eyes staring at me as I stepped out of the bushes, and I think about what would have happened if I hadn't stopped. If I hadn't yelled. I wasn't a hero. I was just a girl walking home from school, but that day, it was enough. In the days that followed, everything felt surreal. The police came by my house twice, once to take another statement and again to thank me for the video. They said it was the key piece of evidence to tie the man to other crimes. "It's rare someone steps in like that," one of the officers told me. "Most people would have just kept walking." "What you did saved that boy's life." I didn't know how to respond to that. I'd never thought about being brave before. I'd always thought of myself as just me. I wasn't the kind of person who stood up in big moments, or so I thought. News spread fast in my neighborhood. Some people praised me like I was some kind of superhero. Others whispered about how dangerous it had been to confront that man. My parents were a mix of proud and terrified. You could have been hurt, my mom kept saying, brushing my hair like I was still 10 years old. What if he'd had a weapon? What if he'd turned on you? But my dad, quiet as always, just patted my shoulder and said, "You did the right thing, kiddo." His voice had a hint of pride that I'd never heard before. For then there were the questions from people at school. Kids who usually didn't even look at me were suddenly stopping me in the halls, asking if the stories were true. My friends stuck close to me, making sure no one overwhelmed me. But even they asked what it had felt like to face a kidnapper. I didn't know how to explain that I hadn't thought about it at the time I'd just acted. The hardest part, though, came a week later when I was invited to a community event organized by Timmy's mom. She wanted to thank everyone who had helped me, the police and the paramedics. At first, I didn't want to go. The idea of standing in front of a crowd made my stomach turn. But my mom insisted. The event was small but packed with emotion. Timmy's mom gave a speech, her voice breaking several times as she talked about how scared she'd been when she couldn't find her son. She said it was people like me who reminded her there were still good, brave people in the world. When it was my turn to say something, I froze. I stared out at the crowd, my palms sweaty, my mind blank. Timmy was sitting in the front row with his arm in a little sling, smiling at me like I was his favorite person in the world. That's when I realized what I wanted to say. I'm not special. I started, my voice shaky. I was scared. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just couldn't walk away. I couldn't ignore what was happening. I paused, my eyes meeting Timmy's. I think we all have moments where we have to decide, do we step up or do we look the other way? I'm just glad I chose to step up. The crowd clapped, and I felt a strange mix of embarrassment and pride. After the event, Timmy's mom hugged me again, tears streaming down her face. "You're like an angel to us," she said softly. I didn't feel like an angel. I just felt like a girl who'd happened to be in the right place at the right time. But as Timmy tugged on my sleeve and asked me to sit with him, showing me his favorite coloring book, I realized that maybe that was enough. Life moved on after that. The buzz eventually died down, and people stopped asking questions. But I kept thinking about that moment in the woods, about how easily I could have kept walking. It's a memory that stayed with me even now. It's not just about what happened to Timmy. It's about how that moment taught me something about courage. That sometimes it doesn't feel like courage at all. It feels like fear, like hesitation, like a racing heart and shaking hands, but it still matters. It can still save a life. Months went by, and I began to settle back into my routine school. Homework, hanging out with friends. It all felt normal again. But the experience in the woods left a permanent mark on me. Sometimes at night I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how close Timmy had been to something unspeakable. What kept me awake the most wasn't the what-ifs about the day, it was wondering how many other kids like Timmy were out there who didn't have someone to step in and help them. That question stayed in the back of my mind, quiet but constant. Then one day, it found a way out. Our school counselor, Mrs. Bradley, was talking about an upcoming student project. She said we could pick any topic, as long as it was about helping our community. Most of my classmates groaned. It sounded like another boring assignment, but I felt a spark of an idea. When it was my turn to present my project idea, I stood up and cleared my throat. I want to create a program for kids to learn how to stay safe and recognize danger, like how to avoid strangers, what to do if someone tries to grab them, or how to get help if they're lost. A hush fell over the room, and I could see a few kids sit up straighter. Even Mrs. Bradley looked intrigued. "Where'd you get that idea?" she asked gently. I hesitated. The story about Timmy hadn't come up in months. It felt weird to bring it up again, but I figured it was the truth. I saw something happen to a kid. He almost got hurt, but someone stopped it. I avoided meeting anyone's eyes. I just think it's important for kids to know what to do. "It could save them, Mrs." Bradley nodded slowly. "That's an excellent idea, Sarah. Let's talk about how to make it happen." Over the next few weeks, I worked harder on that project than I'd worked on anything before. I researched, wrote scripts, and even convinced the school to let me host a workshop for younger students. It wasn't easy. I stumbled over my words when I practiced, and the thought of public speaking made me want to hide under my bed. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered Timmy's terrified eyes, and it kept me going. The workshop was small, just a dozen kids from first and second grade, but it was amazing. We talked about staying in groups, how to shout loudly if you feel unsafe, and even practiced running to a trusted adult. The kids laughed and played along, but I could tell they were absorbing every word. By the end of the session, one little girl tugged on my sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now I know what to do if a bad person tries to take me." Her words hit me harder than I expected, and I had to blink back tears. That first workshop grew into something bigger, Mrs. Bradley helped me connect with local organizations, and soon we were hosting sessions at community centers, libraries, and parks. Timmy and his mom even came to a few. Every time I saw his smile, I knew I was doing the right thing eventually. The workshops caught the attention of a local reporter. When she asked why I started all this, I finally told the full story about Timmy. The article spread through town and more people started reaching out, asking how they could help or join. Looking back, it's strange to think about how much changed because of one decision I made that day in the woods. I was just a scared girl with a shaky voice and an old phone. But that was enough to make a difference, to save a boy's life and to create something that might save others. Now, whenever I feel small or unsure, I remind myself of Timmy's hug, his mom's tears, and the kids at the workshops who look up at me with such trust. Sometimes, being brave isn't about feeling fearless. It's about choosing to do something anyway. Even when your legs are shaking, your voice is cracking, and your heart feels like it's about to burst. It's about stepping up, because that's how change starts. And that's how lives are saved. As the workshops grew, so did the impact. Parents started attending with their children, sharing their gratitude and often their own fears. Many of them told me they'd never really thought about teaching their kids what to do in dangerous situations, not until they heard my story. One night I was sitting at the kitchen table, working on more plans for the program, when my mom sat down across from me. She placed a hand on the papers I was shuffling around and gave me one of her serious looks. "You know this isn't just a school project anymore, right?" she said softly. I nodded. I knew what had started as an assignment was now bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. But it wasn't something I could just stop doing. It felt like a part of me now. My mom smiled and handed me an envelope. "This came for you today. I think you'll like it." I opened it slowly, my hands trembling a little. Inside was a formal-looking letter from a local nonprofit. They wanted to fund my workshops and help me reach even more kids. At the bottom, someone had handwritten a note. "Your courage is inspiring. Keep going. We need more people like you in the world." Tears stung my eyes as I reread the letter. It was the first time I realized that what I was doing wasn't just helping kids. It was giving parents and communities a way to feel safer, to believe that someone cared enough to take action. With the nonprofit support, we expanded the program. Volunteers joined in, including a few high school friends and even some adults who had read about the workshops. We started offering sessions in neighborhoods where resources were scarce and where families often felt overlooked. One of those neighborhoods was Timmy's. I hadn't been back there since the day I found him in the woods, but his mom had asked me to come. She wanted me to meet some of the families and kids she knew. The first session there was harder than I expected. The kids were shy, their parents weary. Many of them had stories that weren't all that different from Timmy's close calls, suspicious strangers, and the constant fear that comes with knowing you or your child might be seen as a target. One mom pulled me aside after the session. "I just want to thank you for doing this," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "Sometimes it feels like no one cares about kids like ours. But you do. That means everything." Her words stuck with me long after I left. They reminded me why I couldn't stop even when the work felt overwhelming. By the time I graduated high school, the workshops had reached hundreds of kids across the city. My inbox was filled with messages from parents, teachers, and community leaders asking if I could bring the program to their areas. I didn't know how I would manage it all, but I knew I wasn't going to stop. The nonprofit that had supported me offered to help formalize the program into a full-fledged organization. They helped me design a curriculum, create training materials for other volunteers, and even launch a website so families could access resources online. The first time someone referred to me as the founder of something, I laughed. Me? A founder? I was still just a girl who walked home from school, the girl who had stumbled her way into something much bigger than herself. But every time I felt doubt creeping in, I thought about Timmy. I thought about his laugh, the way his smile lit up his face every time he saw me. And I thought about the small part I'd played in making sure he got to keep laughing, keep smiling, keep living. Because at the end of the day, that's what all of this was about, giving kids the chance to live their lives without fear. and maybe, just maybe, showing the world that it doesn't take a superhero to make a difference. Sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses to look away.